Good morning, guys. Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to discuss about Spring Security. So what is this Spring Security and how to use this Spring Security to secure our applications? As part of this session, what we are going to learn? What is our agenda as part of this Spring Security workshop? First, we need to understand what is this Spring Security and why we are going to learn this Spring Security. Then after, we are going to discuss about what is authorization and what is authentication. When we are developing any web application, the most important concepts how to secure that application by using authentication and authorization. Then how to add Spring Security for our application. In the Spring Boot application, how to implement that security for achieving authentication and authorization, and how to implement in-memory authentication in that Spring Boot application. What is in-memory authentication? And the next one, how we are going to secure our application by using a concept called user details service concept. If you want to secure your application, then we are going to use a concept called user details service concept. Then after that, we are going to understand how to implement user registration plus login using security. How to implement Spring Security when user is trying to register in the application and when user is trying to log in into our application. Then after, we are going to understand how to secure our application by using OAuth. So now if you see, many web applications are using this OAuth security to secure our applications with third-party applications. Suppose if you go to any website, there will be one option, login into website by using Google, sign in into website by using Facebook, login into website by using GitHub. Like that, we can integrate social media applications to secure our application. For that, we are going to use a concept called OAuth. Then after that, we are going to understand the real-time security implementation for our applications by using JWT tokens. Okay, how to implement JWT security in our applications. All right. So, and next one, we are going to see how we will secure a microservices based application. So if you are having single application like monolith, security implementation will be different. If your application is having microservices architecture, multiple APIs will be available. When we are having multiple APIs in our application, then how to secure that microservices based application by using Spring Security with the help of JWT. JWT stands for JSON Web Tokens. It is used to implement token-based security. A token will be generated for the user to access our application. If a token is expired, that user cannot access that application. So we will generate one token for every user. With that token, we will verify whether that user is a valid user or not, whether that request is a valid request or not to access our application. Okay, so earlier people used session to validate whether user is valid or not. But today, when we are developing the REST APIs, session management will not be available in the REST APIs because REST API nothing but a stateless backend application. Session concept will not be used, should not be used in the REST API. Then how to secure our REST API? That's where we are using a concept called JWT. So which is very important in the real-time application. Nowadays, if you see any real-time application, that will be secured by using a mechanism called JWT. What is the full form of the JWT? JSON Web tokens. All right, for good. So I hope you got the clarity what we are going to learn for next 2 to 3 days of time. So next 2 to 3 days we are going to understand Spring security concept. As part of this we are going to discuss what is a security module and why this is a security module. Next we are going to understand what is authentication in the security context, what is authorization, and how to add security for our Spring Boot application, and how to implement in-memory authentication for application. Suppose I will fix username and password within the project only for the authentication. If you want to implement database level user details, then user details service class will be available. Once you got the clarity on this concept, then we will develop one REST API with user registration and user login functionality. Then we will implement OAuth in our application to implement social media logins. For example, if you go to a website, Hacker Rank, that is a famous online coding platform. So many companies are using this Hacker Rank to check the skill set of the students, right? Now go to login. Here, if you want to create a account or if you want to log in into this Hacker Rank website, you need to create the account in the website and you need to log in. But I am not interested to create the account in the Hacker Rank. I don't want to share my details with the Hacker Rank website. If I want to create an account, I should give my name, my email ID, my contact number. But I am not interested to share my details with the Hacker Rank. But here I want to use the Hacker Rank without creating the account. That's where they have used a concept called OAuth. If you already have an account in the GitHub, if you already have your account in the GitHub, by using your GitHub account, you can log in into HackerRank. Without creating the account in the HackerRank, I want to log in by using my GitHub account, by using Google account, by using LinkedIn account, by using Facebook account. So when you click on continue with GitHub, now it is going to use a concept called OAuth concept. Okay, so that's where if you want to implement, see here, I'm able to log in into HackerRank website by using my GitHub, right? Like this, if you want to implement a security, then we will use a concept called OAuth security. So if you want to secure REST APIs, then we are going to use JWT token. How to implement that JWT in microservice based applications, we are going to understand. Are you guys clear? If you want to attend this session, then what are the prerequisites, guys? The prerequisites, you should be having good knowledge on Spring Boot plus Data JPA. So if you have knowledge on Spring Boot and Data JPA, then easily you can understand this Spring security session. Online students, are you able to follow me? Online students, are you able to follow me? Is my voice clear? Very good. Fine. Let's get started. So here Spring security is available, guys. So here security is very important for every web application. If you are developing one application to the client, then it's mandatory that we need to implement security for that application. Why we need to implement that security for the application? To protect our application and application data. So I don't want other users to access my data in my application. So that's where we need to implement security for our application. So to implement that security, Spring Framework provided one module called security module. Spring Framework is collection of modules. So in that framework, core module available, okay, data module is available, web MVC available, AOP available, REST available, cloud available. Along with that, there is one more important module called security module. Nowadays, in the industry, every Java application is developing by using Spring Framework. In that framework only, one module is available that is called security module. So Spring Security is one of the module of the Spring Framework like core, context, MVC, cloud, data. So similar to that, Spring Security is also one of the Spring Framework module. Okay, by using this Spring Security module, we can secure both web applications as well as REST APIs also. Web application nothing but which will have user interface also. REST API means pure backend application. What is the current trend in the market? Monolithic or microservices? Microservices. Microservices nothing but backend REST APIs will be available. So in order to secure those REST APIs, we can use Spring Security module. If you are not using REST API, you are developing a monolithic application, web application. That web application also we can secure by using our Spring Security module. Are you clear with my point? What is Spring Security? It is one module available in the Spring framework. So by using this Spring Security module, we can secure what type of applications? What type of applications we can secure? We can secure both web applications as well as REST APIs also. We can secure web application as well as REST APIs also by using this Spring Security. And by using this Spring Security, mainly we are going to implement two concepts, guys. By using Spring Security, mainly we are going to implement two concepts. One is called authentication. One is called authentication. Second one is called authorization. So first we need to understand what is this authentication and what is authorization. So very simple. We are having our application. We are having our application. So in this application, there are several functionalities are available. Some login functionality is available, okay, and the registration functionality available, dashboard functionality is available, manager functionality available, admin functionality is also available. So these are the URL patterns of several methods. So this is my application. So in this application, several functionalities are available. So one user want to access our application. So now which user can access our application? We are going to verify whether that user belongs to our application or not. So that concept is called as authentication. Authentication is basically verifying user identity, whether that user credentials are valid or not. Basically, authentication means login check. Whether that user can log in into our application or not, we are going to verify. The process of verifying user credentials are valid or not, that is called authentication. So can you tell me what is the meaning of authentication here? Authentication means verifying who can access our application. So here, if you go to this website, login, I'm entering email ID and password. Click on login. What happened? Authentication failed. What is the meaning of that? Authentication failed. My application don't know who is this user. My application don't know who is this user. For example, if I give correct information, if I click on login, I'm able to log in. What is the meaning of that? Authentication successful. User authenticated successfully. User authenticated successfully. So can you tell me what is the meaning of authentication in the security? Authentication means verifying that user can access our application or not. Verifying that user can access our application or not. Once a user able to access our application, once a user able to log in into this application. For example, this username is Raju. This Raju is a student in our application. In the Ashok IT application, student login is available, trainer login is available, counselor login available, admin login available, super admin login is also available, recruiter login is also available. So there are 5 types of users available in our application. Students available, faculties available, admin, super admin, counselor, recruiter. 6 types of logins available in my application. Now Raju trying to log in with his email ID and password. Credentials are valid. Credentials are valid means Raju authenticated successfully. Raju logged in into our application. After login into application, Raju trying to access admin functionality. But actually, what is the role of Raju? Raju is a student. He can access only student functionalities. But what he is trying to access? Admin functionality. So we need to verify whether Raju is eligible to access admin functionality or not. That is called authorization. Authorization means verifying which user can access which functionality in our application. Whether user can access our application or not, that is authentication. After authentication is successful, that user can access particular functionality or not. We need to verify, that is called as authentication or authorization. Authorization. So now tell me, what is the meaning of authorization? Authorization means verifying which user can access which functionality in our application. Are you able to follow this? So why we are using Spring Security in the project? Mainly to achieve two things. One is authentication, another one is authorization. So Spring Security is one module available in the Spring framework. By using this module, we can secure both web applications as well as REST APIs also. To implement security for any application, first you should have clarity on authentication and authorization. Authentication means verifying which user can access our application. If credentials are valid, authentication success. Once authentication success, next authorization comes into picture. What is the meaning of authorization? Whether this user is eligible to access specific functionality or not. This authentication and authorization we are going to implement in our project by using Spring Security module. Are you able to understand? What is authentication and what is authorization and what is the Spring Security? Fine. Now, how to implement this Spring Security in our project? How to implement Spring Security in our project? In order to implement Spring Security in our project, Spring Boot provided one security starter. Okay, working with Spring Security in our project. If you want to implement security for your application, then you should add one dependency in the pom.xml. What is that dependency? Spring Boot Starter Security Dependency. When you add this security dependency, auto configuration will work in the Spring Boot. By default, your application will be secured with a basic authentication. When you add security starter in the pom.xml of your application, then by default, your application will be secured using a concept called HTTP basic authentication. Can we see that practically? Right. Now go to this IDE, new starter project. I'm creating one project here. 04 Spring Security Application. Click on next. Add the dependencies. DevTools I'm adding. Web Starter I'm adding. Lombok I'm adding. And I'm adding one more dependency called security dependency. Spring security dependency I am adding. Can you read this? What dependencies we are having? DevTools dependency, Lombok dependency, security dependency, web dependency is also available. Click on next, finish. I'm creating one boot application by adding security starter in the pom.xml. When you add a security starter in the pom.xml, boot will understand, okay, this application requires a security and it will provide auto configuration for that. What is the meaning of auto configuration? Provide the configuration required for the application in the runtime. Instead of we are adding the concepts, instead of we are writing the code, they will provide some default functionality for our application. So how that auto configuration will work? Based on form starters available in the application. If you add web starter, Tomcat server will start by default. If you add dev tools, code will, whenever code is changed, application will restart. When you add security starter, basic authentication will be provided by default. Okay. Now I just created a project by using security starter. Now let me create one REST controller in this project. Dot REST, some demo REST controller. Demo REST controller class I'm creating. Take annotation, read the rate REST controller. This class will be represented as a REST controller. Okay. Voice is not clear, screen is not visible. Online students, is my screen visible for everyone? Voice is clear? Yeah, very good. So I'm creating one Java class with a name called REST demo REST controller. I'm representing this class as a REST controller by using one annotation. Then next one, let me write one method in this class, public string get message, public string get message. So return good morning. I'm just adding one message, and let me map this method to a get request by using get mapping slash message. All right. So am I writing any code related to security? No, I'm not writing anything related to security. Just I created one REST controller. I created one method. I map it to get request. All right. Now let us start this application, guys. Just run this application. Project clean. Maven update to download the dependencies forcefully. Now let me run this application as a Springboot. I'm running this application as Springboot. Now can you see here? As we added security starter in the pom.xml, it generated one random password for our application. It generated random password for the application. Can you see this statement now? This generated password is for development use only. Your security configuration must be updated before running your application in the production. So whatever security that you are getting now with auto configuration, that is very, very basic. That is for only your development purpose. If you want to deploy your application in the production, then your security configuration should be updated, guys. Fine. So I am able to start my application. Now go to browser. Let us try to access localhost colon 8080 slash message. Wow. When I access my application, I'm getting one login page by default. Did I develop this login page? Who is providing this login page now? Security is providing. Can we say auto configuration is working? I'm just adding a dependency in the pom.xml. Then when I access my application, by default, login page is coming for my application. That means authentication is available for the application. What is the meaning of authentication? Verifying which user can access our application. Authentication. Now, so did I develop this login page, or it is coming by default? It is coming by default. Now how to access my method? My REST controller method is available. I want to access my REST controller method, but it is asking me to log in. So username is user by default. Username is user by default. Password, it is generated and printed on the console. It is printed on the console. Copy this password, copy this password and use it. Okay. I'm trying to authenticate. I'm trying to authenticate. I'm giving the default username is user, password generated on the console. Click on sign in. Yes, now my authentication got success. I'm able to log in and I'm able to access my method. Okay, now same thing. Let me access from another browser. Localhost colon 8080 slash message, different browser. Again it is asking me to log in. Earlier I logged in the Chrome browser. Now I am asking Edge browser. It is asking me to log in. Enter some wrong details. Click on sign in. It is saying bad credential. My authentication got failed. Now, so let me give username and default password. Click on sign in. Now I am able to log in successfully. So where is the logic to display this login page to validate the login credentials? Where is that code available? Is it developed by me? No, that code is available in the security starter. This security is called basic security. This is called HTTP basic authentication. Are you able to follow this? So if you create a Spring Boot application by adding security starter, so to secure our boot application, we need to add one starter in the pom.xml. So when we add this dependency in the pom.xml file, then by default, our application will be secured with a HTTP basic authentication. For the basic authentication, it will generate random password to access our application. That random password you can see on the console. What is the password is generated and printing on the console. What about the username? What about the username? What is the default username? Default username is user. Password available in the console. Okay, now when I am accessing application from the browser, it is displaying a login page. Okay, now same REST API I want to access from Postman. It is a REST API. How to test the REST API? How we will test the REST APIs? By using Postman. Okay, I want to send get request 8080 slash message. Okay, now I am using get request. I want to send that request. Click on send. What happened now? Boss, you cannot access that method. You are not authorized to access that method. If you want to access that method, your authentication should be successful. So you see the difference here. When I access that URL from the browser, login page is coming. But when I access from the Postman, login page will not come. Then how to access secured REST APIs from the Postman? How to access secured REST API from the Postman? Now, in this HTTP GET request, we need to send authentication credentials to the server. Are you able to follow me? When you access this from the browser, now see here, I closed my browser and I am accessing this again. Localhost colon 8080 slash message. What happened now? My browser closed. Session got deleted from the browser. Again, it is asking me to log in. Okay, from the browser, I am good. But I want to access this REST API from the Postman. So when I hit same URL from the Postman, what it is saying? 401 unauthorized. But that means I am not authorized to access that method because authentication is not done. So it is not giving login page. Then how to do authentication? From the browser, login page is coming. I can enter my username and password. If it is valid, then I can access the method. Same method I want to access from here. Login page is not coming. So remember, when you want to access any secured REST API, you need to send authentication details in the request, guys. You need to send authentication details in the request. So what authentication? HTTP basic authentication. What authentication is available for our project now? When you add security starter, what authentication is provided for us now? It is provided HTTP basic authentication. So now to access secured REST API from the Postman, you need to send the header. You need to send the header. Go to Auth tab here. What type of authentication is available for the REST API? Basic authentication is available. So select the type as basic auth. Select the type authentication type as basic auth. When you give type as a basic auth, it is asking what is your username. Okay, user. What is the password? Where is the password available? In the console. Copy that password and give that password here. Give that password here. Click on send. Now I got the response. Are you able to understand? So when you are accessing secured REST API from the browser, it will ask you to log in with your username and password. Same REST API, I want to access from Postman. If I want to access from the Postman, you need to send authentication details in the request header. Header key and header value will be available. What is the header key? Authorization. What is the value? Basic space encoded username and password. Okay, whatever our username and password is available, this username and password will go to server like this. Authorization. Authorization is the key is equal to basic space base 64 dot encode our username colon password. So Postman is sending a request header like this to the server. Then our server will retrieve this header value and it will verify username password valid or not. If username password is valid, then authentication success, then you can access the method. If you access from browser, one logic is executing. If you are accessing from the Postman, another logic is executing. Security is a dynamic here. If you are trying to hit the URL from the browser, it will give you login page. If you try to hit the URL from the Postman, it will check for HTTP header. What is the header key? Authorization. What is the header value? Basic space encoded username and password. Username colon password. You encode that by using this base 64. So who is going to do that encoding? That encoding will done by Postman. Finally, our header value sending like this. Who encoded this? Our username and password is encoded like this. Who is doing that encoding? Programmer is doing or Postman is doing? Postman is doing. For example, if I don't send that header, okay, authentication type as no auth. Authentication type as no auth. Now can you see authorization header is going to the server in the request packet? Not going. Send a request. What it is saying now? 401 unauthorized. Boss, you can't access this method because you are not authenticated. Are you able to follow me? What is basic authentication? When you add security starter in the pom.xml, by default, basic authentication will be provided. When your application is having a basic authentication, if you access from the browser, login page will come. If you access from the Postman, you need to send authentication details in the request header. What is a header key? What is a header value? Come on. Simple. Now can I say my REST API is secured now? Whatever this REST API is available, can I say this REST API is secured now? How it is secured? What kind of security available? Spring security. That Spring security providing by default HTTP basic authentication. If I access my application from browser, what is the behavior? If I access my application from the browser, what is the behavior? By default, login page will come. What are the credentials for login? username will be user. What is the password? Random, generated on the console. Now I want to access same application from Postman. I want to access same application from Postman. Then what I need to do? I need to send authentication details in the request header. What is that header key? Authorization. Header key is a authorization. What is the value? Basic space encoded username and password. So go to your Postman, select authentication type as basic auth, username is user, password from the console. Then send the request. Now it is 200 successful. I got the response. Authentication success. I got the response. Are you clear? Now fine. Suppose for example same application I want to access by using consumer. Now I am having a REST API, guys. Now I am having a REST API. This is secured REST API. This is a secured REST API by using what security? Basic auth. That is a default. That is a default which is provided by Spring Security. That is a default provided by Spring Security. Now we are able to access this application from the browser. This REST API we accessed from the browser. This REST API we accessed from Postman also. From the browser we are able to access, and we are able to access from the Postman also. Are you clear with my point now? From the browser we are able to access secured REST API with a login page. From the Postman we are able to access secured REST API by using authorization header. Now I want to access this REST API from consumer application. Okay, REST API means it is a provider. Now I want to access secured REST API by using consumer. That means I am developing one client application. This client can be Java, client can be Python, Angular, or React. It can be anything. It can be anything. Now my application want to access secured REST API. Directly can we hit the URL now? Directly can we hit the URL now? No, directly we cannot hit the URL. Why? Because it is secured. Now my client application is going to send HTTP request programmatically. My client application as of now, from browser we send the request, from the Postman we send the request. Now I want to access this secured REST API using consumer application. I want to access this secured REST API by using consumer application. So if you send directly GET request by using REST template or web client or PN client, it will not work. Why it will not work directly? Because it is secured. So if you want to access secured REST API programmatically, you need to send authentication header details in the request. Key is authorization, value, basic, space, encoded username and password. That header you need to send in the request, then only your request will be processed. Otherwise your request will not be processed. Are you able to follow this? Now the question, how to send header in the request programmatically? So tomorrow you may get a task in the company. You need to develop a consumer application that is going to access third party REST API. That third party REST API is secured. That third party REST API is secured. So now if you want to access that REST API from your consumer application, you need to send a request along with the header. What you need to send in the header? Key is authorization, value is basic space, encoded username and password. Then in the interview, they will ask you a question. Can you tell me how do you send authentication details in the request header by using REST template? So how you are developing a consumer in the Java? Using REST template, using web client. Now the question they will ask in the interview, this one: how to send authentication details in request header using REST template. Okay, how to send authentication details in the request header by using REST template. In the same way, I will ask one more question: how to send authentication details in the request header by using web client. So you can access REST API by using REST template, or you can access REST API by using web client also. But those REST APIs are secured. How do you access them? By using REST template. How do you access them? By using web client. Are you clear with my point? Are you clear with my point? What is REST template here? What is REST template? It is a class. It is a class in the web MVC to send HTTP requests programmatically. How we are sending the request from the browser? How we are sending request from the Postman? Similarly, similarly, I want to send a request. Excuse me, 1 minute. Now, right? So we are sending a request to the REST API from the browser, then it is asking login. We are sending request from the Postman by using authorization, authentication details in the header. Key is authorization, value is basic. Earlier, we sent a request to the REST API by using REST template, rt.get for entity. rt.get for entity is available. API URL we are giving. Whatever the response I want, I will get like this. Okay. Now, if I execute this, will it work? Will it work or will not work? Will not work. Why it will not work? The API that I am trying to access is secured. How it is secured? By using basic authentication. Now if I want to access that secured API, then what we need to do? We need to send authorization authentication header in the request. What is the format of that? What is the header format? Key is authorization, value is basic space, encoded username and password. So you need to generate this header. That header you need to send in the request by using REST template or by using web client. Then only you can access secured REST API. Are you able to follow this? Right. Now, how to do that? In order to do this, we need to write some program. Okay. REST template will support for sending the header, as well as web client also will support for sending the request. Now see here, if you are using web client to send a request with the header, how we will use that web client dot get. Okay, dot URI. What is our API URL? What is our API URL? We are going to specify the REST API URL. We are going to specify REST API URL. HTTP colon double slash localhost colon 8080 slash message. Okay, earlier we used dot retrieve, and we used a concept called body to mono. I want to map this to the string variable, string dot class, and I will use dot block method. Okay, this is the logic of the web client. which is used to send a GET request to the REST API. But it is a normal REST API or it is a secured REST API? It is a secured REST API. Here, what you need to do is, in order to send that request, you need to pass the header. You need to pass the header. What is the header key here? The header key is authorization. What is the value? Basic. You need to pass encoded username and password. So if you send header like this, then only your request will be processed. Otherwise, your request will not be processed. Are you able to follow this? Same thing, when you are going for the REST template also, you need to send the details in the header programmatically. If you don't know that, simply you can search in the Google. How to send request header, how to send request header by using REST template. How to send request header by using REST template. You can get the code. So see here, HTTP headers object is available. They are setting the key and value for the header. That key and value they are passing to one HTTP entity. That HTTP entity they are passing by using REST template dot exchange method. So this logic we need to implement in the REST template, guys. This is the logic we need to implement. Here what I will set, what is my key? Authorization. What is my value? Basic. You need to use what? Base 64 dot encode our username colon password. So then it will generate the value. Okay, that headers we are passing to one object called HTTP entity. So if you want to send headers in the request, get for entity will not work. You need to use a method called exchange method. I want to send a request to this API URL. I want to send a GET request, request entity. What is there in the request entity? Header is available. So this is the approach you need to follow when you want to access secured REST API by using REST template. Same thing, if you want to access that by using web client, this is the approach you need to follow. Programmatically, when you are accessing secured REST APIs, you need to send the header in the request. You need to send the header in the request, then only it will allow you to access. Otherwise, it will not allow you to access. From the browser, when you are sending login page. From the Postman, we are sending authentication details. Programmatically, when you are sending header, we need to set in the request. How to set the header in the request? By using REST template. This is the logic. How to set the header in the web client? This is the logic. So programmatically, when you are accessing secured REST API, you need to remember authentication details we need to send in the request header. Able to follow me? Very good. Now we will see programmatically we will access that. Okay. So here I am running my Spring Boot application which is having security starter. When the security starter is available, username will become by default user. Password, what about the password? A random password is available and it is generated on the console. A random password is available that is generated in the console. Every time when I restart my application, password will change. If my application is restarted, then what will happen? When I restart my application, password will change. What about consumers then? For consumers, I will give one username and password. If I restart, they will try to access with the old password. Will it accept with the old password? No, it will not accept with the old password. So every time generating random password is recommended for authentication? No. So it is not because assume that I am a provider. I developed my REST API. You are my consumer. I am giving username and password for you to access my application. Programmatically, you are going to send a request by using REST template with username and password. But yesterday I gave the credentials for you. Today my application restarted. Today my application restarted. Then password will change. but you will try to access with the old password. But my application is having a new password. So is it recommended or not recommended? Not recommended. That's where we can override default credentials. So whatever the credentials we are getting, these are called as default credentials. Key, I mean username is user, password is randomly generated. I don't like this password. I can't give this password to the client. Why I can't give this password to the client? It will change. So yesterday I gave you my username and password for my you are my client, boss. You are my client. I am a provider for you. So you want to access my services. You want to access my REST API by using username and password. I gave username and password for you. You have written your logic by using REST template, by using web client. You implemented the logic to access my API. But today, my API got restarted. My API got restarted. Then what is the problem? My API got restarted. Then what is the problem? Password got changed. What password you are using? Old. My application checking? New. Always your request will fail. If request is failing, will you pay money for me? I am a provider, you are my consumer, you want to access my services. If I process if I process your request, then only you will pay the money for me. So there is a problem if you use random password like this. There is a problem if you use random password like this. So that's why we are going to override credentials here. We are going to override the security default credentials. How to override security default credentials? By using spring dot security dot user dot name. I am giving as Ashok IT. Spring dot security dot user dot password. Ashok IT at the rate 123. Now default user, default password will not come. Now my application is secured with these credentials. Now these credentials are not going to change. I am fixing credentials for my application authentication. Now I will give these credentials for you. If I restart my application 1,000 times also, credentials are not going to change. Are you able to follow me? Right. Now let me run this application. Project clean. Let me do the Maven update. Update the project. Earlier, when I don't write these properties, password printed on the console. Now observe the behavior of the application. Refresh, run as boot application. Now, can you see? Password is coming on the console. Password is not coming on the console. Password is not coming on the console. Now go to Postman, access our application, basic auth, username is user, password is old, send the request. What is happening? Unauthorized boss. What is my username? Ashok IT. Password Ashok IT at the rate 123. Send the request. Now I'm able to access. If I restart my application also, is there any problem? If I restart my application, is there any problem? There is no problem. Why? We have hard coded authentication credentials. This is called overriding default credentials of security. So by default, Spring Security will give you username as user, random password. I don't want them. I want to customize. I want to override. I want to configure my own credentials. For that, I am writing two properties in the application.properties file. Spring.security.user.name, spring.security.user.password. Now I will give these credentials for my consumers. They can access my application with these credentials. Are you able to follow this? Now that is the point I have given in the notes also. Now here, how to override Spring Security default credentials. How to override Spring Security default credentials. To override default credentials, we can configure security credentials in the properties file or YML file like below. So these two properties, if you add in your properties file, then it will override default credentials of Spring Security for HTTP basic authentication. Are you able to follow me? Very good. So my REST API is available, which is having security, guys. Now can we consider our REST API is a secured REST API now? Can we call this REST API is a secured REST API? What is the meaning of secured REST API? Everybody cannot access. Everybody cannot access my URL. If you know my security credentials, then only you can access my REST API. Are you able to follow this? Now, let us create one application as a consumer application. What this is a provider. Can we consider this is a provider now? REST API provider. It is a secured. What are the credentials? Ashok IT, Ashok IT at the rate 123. Now I want to develop consumer application to access secured REST API. What kind of security? Basic authentication. Now create a project. File new, Spring Starter, Spring Starter 0505 Spring Security Consumer Application. Go here, go to Web Dependency DevTools Lombok. Security dependency required or not? No. My application is a consumer application to access provider. Click on Next, Finish. Now go to this application resources. I will change the port number. Provider is using 8080. Consumer I will run with 9090. Provider running on 8080. Consumer will run on 9090. Now go to start class. Right. Here only let me use REST template. REST template RT is equal to new REST template. Now what is our API URL? String API URL http colon double slash localhost colon 8080 slash message. How to, I want to send a get request. How to send a get request? RT dot get for entity API URL comma string dot class. String dot class. So hold the response. What is the return type of this method? Response entity. Response entity. Okay. From this response entity, I want to get the response. For entity dot get body. That body I want to print on the console. Are you clear? So what is this now? Can we call this as a consumer logic? What is this consumer doing? It is accessing a provider. Provider method is secured or non-secured? Secured. But am I passing security credentials? No. Blindly I am trying to access provider. Let us see what is the behavior. First let me run my provider application. Security provider app I am running. Okay. Clear the console. Go to browser and try to access from browser. Localhost colon 8080 slash message. Here it is coming with the login page. What is the username? Password. At the rate 123. You can see the password also. If I give wrong, then bad credentials. Valid authentication is failed. Now let me give correct credentials. At the rate 123. Click on sign in. Yes, authentication success. I'm able to access. Try from the Postman. Success. We got it. Now my security provider is available. Let me start my consumer application. Okay. So it will start from start class. What I am doing in the start class? What I am doing in the start class? I created REST template object. I am calling get for entity method. I'm trying to access my provider by using REST template. So run this consumer logic, run as boot app, consumer logic. Okay, what it is saying, guys? Your it is giving by default login page content. Am I getting the response or I am not getting the response? Response is coming. What response is coming? HTML content is coming. But what I want? API response. Am I getting the actual response from the method or I am getting the login page here? Login page. I don't want login page. I want actual response. How I can get the actual response now? This logic will not work. I need to send a request in the header. I need to send a request in the header. So what is the logic I need to do for that? I need to create a headers object. I need to set the header and I need to create entity. That entity I need to use to send the get request. So if you can implement this code, then you can access secured REST API. Are you able to follow me? Can we do this logic now? Yes. First, I need to create one object called HTTP headers object from the Spring framework. So Net HTTP available, Spring HTTP available. Use the Spring HTTP header. HTTP headers is equal to new HTTP headers. Then headers dot set. Headers dot set. By default, we are having set basic auth credentials. For the headers, you can set the basic auth credentials, right? So here, when you want to set authentication credentials, there is a direct method is available. Set basic auth username comma password. What is our username? That is Ashok IT. Password Ashok IT @ 123. Are you clear? Good. Now I created one headers object. So in that object I'm setting basic authentication credentials, username and password. What about the key and encoding? This method will take care of that. Go to set basic auth method. Set basic auth. So what they are doing? Encode basic auth with username and password. What they are doing in the background? They are setting the key as authorization, value as basic space encoded credential. Instead of you are encoding programmatically, there is a direct method is available. If you call this method in the background, they are doing encoding of your username and password. They are setting to the header by using key and value. What is the structure? Structure is authorization is the header key, value is base 64 encoded username password with basic. Finally, it will be available like this. Now I want to send this header in the request. I want to send this header in the request. For this, we need one object called HTTP entity object. We need one object called HTTP entity, which is called request entity. HTTP entity. For that we are passing headers object as a parameter. I created headers object. For that I am setting basic authentication credentials. Then I am creating one entity object. By using this entity, I want to send the request. Directly you can't pass entity to the get for entity method. I am going to remove this. Now we need to call rt dot method exchange. What is the URL? That is our API URL. What is the method? That is HTTP method dot get request entity. What we are expecting? String dot class. What it is going to return? Response entity. From the response entity, I am calling get body method. This is the logic. This is the approach to access secured REST API using REST template. Suppose if REST API is not secured, directly you can call get for entity method. But why I am using exchange method? To send the request entity in the header. I want to send request entity in the header. So for that, I am creating headers object. For the header, I am setting basic auth credentials. That headers I am passing to request entity. That request entity I am passing to my exchange method. Four parameters I'm taking for the method. What are those four parameters? One is URL of the API, which API you want to access, what type of request you want to send, what is request data, what data you want to send in the request, headers I'm sending in the request, what response you are expecting, string.class I'm expecting. Is this clear? Able to understand the code we are writing? What is the purpose of this code? Now, when you send request from the postman like this, in the background, postman will generate code like this. Postman is also a program, right? What is the purpose of a postman? To send a HTTP request. How it is sending that request in the background? Internally, they will generate code like this and they will send the request. So if you want to access from the Postman, directly user interface is available. If you want to access REST API from the another application, this is the approach. Programmatically, we are trying to send HTTP GET request to the provider with a basic authentication credentials in the request header. That is the meaning of that. Now run this application. Okay. Now, can you see? Am I able to access my secured provider by using REST template? So what change I have done in the program? I am passing header details in the request. Okay. So this is the consumer application to access secured provider. This is my consumer application which is used to access my secured provider. Suppose if I want to use a web client, then what I need to do? I'm using REST template to send a request. In some applications, web client will be available to access the application. Then how do you send the header in the request? How do you send header in the request? Simple. There is a header method is available. Or direct set basic auth method will be available. You give username and password. By using web client also you can send the request with the header. By using REST template also you can send the request with the header. Are you clear? Provider, consumer with a basic authentication. What is the meaning of basic authentication? Default security will be available for our application. Default security will be available for our application. Okay. Are you guys clear? Whatever that we discussed now. So what is the Spring security, guys? What is the meaning of Spring security? It is one of the most powerful module available in the Spring framework. Okay. It is one of the most powerful module available in the Spring framework. So what is the purpose of this module? It is used to secure our application. It is used to secure our web applications as well as REST APIs. By using Spring Security, we can implement authentication and authorization. What is the meaning of authentication? Checking which user can access our application. Basically, login we will do by using authentication. What is the meaning of authorization? Which functionality, whether user is eligible to access this functionality or not, that we will do by using authorization. So how to implement security in the Spring Boot? There is one dependency available that is called security starter. There is a dependency called security starter is available. When you add that dependency in the pom.xml, which type of security will be provided? Basic authentication will be provided. Okay. The default username will be user, random password will be generated. Can we override default credentials of Spring Security? How to override default credentials of Spring Security? By adding username and password in the properties file. By adding username and password in the properties file. Okay, good. Now I created one secured REST API by using basic authentication, and I am accessing that secured REST API from the browser, from the Postman, from another application also. So in three different ways we are trying to access secured REST API. First approach, from the browser. When I access from the browser, what is happening? When I access from the browser, what is happening? Directly we are getting login page. How to access this API from Postman? Authentication details we need to send in the header. What is the key? Authorization. What is the value? Basic space encoded username and password. Okay. Now that same API I want to access from consumer application. Consumer can be Java, can be Python, can be Angular, can be React. How to access it? We need to send a GET request programmatically. In that request, we need to set the authentication header details. Okay, by using REST template, we can send that. By using web client also, you can send that. Able to follow me? Very good. So, any questions, anybody as of now? Offline people, you understand what we have implemented? So, but is it recommended in the real time? Whatever the security we implemented, is it recommended in the real time? No. Why? It is basic. The name itself is basic. It is just for our development, for our practice. It is not for real time. Real time security is different. That is with JWT. Okay, this is just a introduction part for what is Spring Security and how it is working in the background with the default behavior. As of now, we have seen default behavior of our Spring Security. Are you able to follow this? Good. Online students, are you with me? Able to follow me? Even after adding password in the YML, it is generating means you need to update your Maven project. It is not considering your latest YML. It is not considering your latest YML. You need to update your project. What is the difference between web client? All those classes are already completed. Okay. This is security class, not Spring Boot class. How to access this code? So this video, this code, I will share in the Git repository. The only thing you need to do, follow our WhatsApp channel. I will upload this class video, this notes in the WhatsApp channel. I will upload this code in the Git repository. Okay. So this is our WhatsApp channel. Just follow this channel so that you will access this. Okay. Good. Next one. Let's move on. Let us see here when this session will complete. Once you become master in the Spring Security, then it will complete. I will not leave you until you become master in the security. All right. So there is one REST controller. In this REST controller, there is one method is available. Okay. Let me add one more method in this. Okay. Get greet. Yeah. This is, let me take it as get welcome. I want to show you what is the behavior of Spring Security when there are multiple methods available in the application. Okay. Great. So I am having two methods in my REST API. This is my provider. This is secured by using Spring Security. Let us run this provider application now. Refresh, run as boot application. Application is started. go to browser. Let me close it and open. Yeah, localhost colon 8080/welcome. Yes. So for welcome method, login page is coming. Similarly, let me access greet method 8080/greet. For this also, login page is coming. So what is the conclusion? Whenever you add security starter in the pom.xml, by default it will secure all the methods of our application. Whenever you add security starter in the application, by default it will secure all the methods of our application. But in the real time, this will not work out. But in the real time, this will not work out, because in our application, there are some methods available. Okay, suppose if you want to access contact us page, security required or security not required? If you want to access events page, security required or security not required? If I want to go for a training schedule, not required. But if I want to access class notes, if I want to access class notes, security required. If I want to access contact us, not required. There is a problem here. There is a problem. So I am creating one method, public string get contact info. Public string get contact info, return call some number. Yeah. So I want to give this information to the client when they access contact details. Get mapping slash contact. Okay. So there are three methods available in my REST API. Let me access this contact URL. Let me access contact URL. Working or not working? Now I want to access contact details. Why to log in? So when you go for a website, to access contact details, do you need to log in into the website? Without login, contact details are coming. If you want to access class notes, Zoom link videos, then you need to log in. So that means in my application, there are multiple methods available. I don't want to apply security for all the methods. I don't want to apply security for all the methods. For few methods security required, for few methods security not required. But what is the default behavior of Spring Security? By default, it is securing all the URL patterns of the application. Now I need to customize this Spring Security module concept. Now we need to go for customization. What I need to do is, I will tell to Spring Security, boss, for these two URLs, security required. But for this URL, security not required. Anybody can access contact page of our website directly. But other pages, they should not access without login. So how to achieve that requirement? So secure specific URLs. Secure only specific URLs. But the default behavior, all the URLs are secured. I don't want to secure all the URLs. Now that is the next concept. Now let us see here how to secure specific URL patterns of our application. Are you getting my point? So what is the concept now? What is the concept now? How to secure specific URL patterns of our application. So I'm not writing the notes, guys. It's time waste. It's already available. Okay. So if I want to type, it will take a lot of time. When we add security starter in pom.xml, then it will apply security filter for all the HTTP methods of our application. So there are three methods available. For these three methods, security is coming by default. Able to follow this? Now, but in the reality, we need to secure only few methods, not all methods in our application. To access a login page, security not required. Anybody can go to login page. But if you want to transfer amount, security required. If you want to check the balance, security required. If you want to see about us page, not required. Contact us page, not. So here, when we add security starter in the pom.xml, then it will apply security filter for all the methods of application. But when we are developing real-time application, we should not secure each and every method in the application. Depends on the requirement. For few URLs, security not required. So how to secure specific URL patterns in the application? That's where we need to customize our Spring security logic. We need to customize Spring security logic. To customize that Spring security logic, we need to take care of one configuration class. We need to create one Java class as a configuration class. In that configuration in that configuration class, there will be a filter called security filter chain will be available. So in that security filter chain, we are going to specify boss. If any request comes with a particular URL, if any request comes with a particular URL, you allow them. Other requests you can secure them. Like this, you need to customize Spring security in our application. So what we are going to customize? Security filter chain we are going to customize. Okay. So let me create one class to customize Spring security in our application. New class dot security. Okay. App security config. Right. So I am going to represent this class as a configuration class. How to represent this class as a configuration class? How to represent this as a configuration class? By using one annotation called @configuration annotation. What kind of configuration I will do? Security configuration. So here we will write one annotation, enable web security. So we are writing one Java class with a name called configuration. And this class is used to customize Spring security configuration in the project. So that's why we are using one annotation called enable web security annotation. Then we need to write one method. That method is going to return security filter chain. We are going to write one security filter chain method. Method name can be anything. Okay. So you can call method name as anything. It will take HTTP security as parameter. Okay, HTTP security only. Yeah. So it is going to take HTTP security as a parameter. This one I'm taking as a bean. So what is the meaning of bean? I'm customizing this. I'm creating the object on my own. Okay. If I do auto wiring, IOC will create the object. I want to create the object. I want to give to IOC as a Spring Bean. I want to create the object. I want to give this objective to the IOC as a Spring Bean. For that we are using @bean annotation. Now in this method, we are going to write the logic to specify which request we are going to allow, which request we should not allow, which request we want to permit, which request we don't want to permit. Okay. So let us do this. HTTP dot HTTP request dot authorize the HTTP request. Authorize the HTTP request, whatever it is coming. Now request dot and any request dot and matchers request dot and matchers request matchers will be available. Request matchers, if it is having the URL as a contact, permit all. Request dot and matchers dot permit all. Any other request should be authenticated. Any other request should be authenticated. Okay. Then what I am going to do? So I'm going to do http.build. I'm going to use http.build. Okay. Return http.build. So what is the meaning of this now? What is the meaning of this now? What is the meaning of this code? Whatever security filter we added to our application, I am telling that any request, which comes with this URL pattern, permit, allow, security not required. So whatever the URL, if any request comes with a URL as a slash contact, permit. Any other request comes, you authenticate. So that is the meaning of that. Getting my point? If any request comes with the contact URL, you permit that request. If any other request, if any other URL pattern comes, you authenticate that request. That is the meaning of this code. We are customizing. Few URL patterns I want to allow directly. Remaining URL patterns I want to secure. So how we are doing this? We are creating one Java class with a name called app security config. How to represent this class as a security class? First of all, it is a configuration class. I'm using at the rate configuration. I'm using enable web security. I'm customizing security filter chain. This security filter chain is responsible to secure our application methods. For which methods security required, for which methods security not required, we are configuring that programmatically. That means we are customizing this security filter chain. Are you clear? Let's try this. Refresh, clean, run this. Clear the console. Now go to Postman. Let me access URL as a contact. Authentication, no. Type as no auth. What is the meaning of no auth? I am not sending authentication details. Directly I am trying to access contact. Send the request. Am I able to get the response? I'm getting the response. Now let me access welcome, forbidden. Contact URL I'm able to access. Remaining URLs I'm not able to access. We are getting 403 boss. You can't access this. You can't access this. Now see, let me give the URL as a contact. Am I passing any authentication in the header? What type of auth is there? No auth. Plain get request I'm sending. Plain get request I'm sending. Am I able to get the response? Yes. Now let me send the request for the greet now. Send the request. What it is saying? 403 forbidden. Why? For that authentication is required. For contact authentication not required. Okay. For accessing greet, send the basic auth, send the request. Now also forbidden. That means not working. So when I send authentication details, it should be able to allow. It should allow us to access, but it is not allowing to access. Something is wrong. HTTP request matches contact, permit all, any other request comes that should be authenticated, return HTTP build. From browser, HTTP localhost, sorry, HTTP dot localhost 8080 slash contact. So contact method we are able to access. There is no problem. But when I go for greet method, access to this is denied. So the login page is also not coming. Something is missing. Anything wrong that we are doing here? Let me take this. App security config and authorize HTTP request. Request matches permit all. Any other request should be authenticated with basic authentication and form login with the defaults. Right? Let us try this. I'm stopping this application. Refresh. Run as boot application. Go to Postman, send the request. Now it is working. Good morning. So basic auth, no auth, send the request. 401 unauthorized is coming. Now let me access contact. For the contact, am I sending any authentication in the request? No. Then I'm able to access directly. Contact page I'm able to access directly. But when I go for greet, am I able to access greet directly? No. So why I'm not able to access greet directly? It is a secure. What kind of security? Basic authentication. So pass the basic auth credentials, username and password. Give the wrong data. Send. Unauthorized. You can't access. Give me the correct data. Send the request. Now I'm able to access with 200 as status code. So what is the logic we have implemented? We are customizing. We are earlier directly we call authenticated. We need to specify. So any other request comes, authenticate that request by using basic authentication. From the browser, if it is accessing, go for the form login. Go to browser, access greet URL. Form login is coming. Okay. From the browser, access contact. Contact page coming directly. But when I access welcome, login page is coming. So specific URL pattern we are able to secure in our application. So this is the customization logic we have done in our project. This is the customization logic we have done. So we are taking HTTP security object as a parameter. We are representing that as a string bean. What is the meaning of bean annotation? What is the meaning of bean annotation? I want to customize. I want to customize this bean. Okay. Why we are doing the customization? If I don't customize, what will happen? If I don't customize this bean, what is going to happen? By default, all methods will be secured in our application. But I don't want that. In the real time, nobody will secure all the methods. Few methods, people should be able to access directly. For few methods, security required. To do that, you need to customize security filter chain bean in your application. So for that, I am writing some logic. Okay. How to customize specific URL patterns of our application. How to customize specific URL patterns of our application. Look at this code and check it. So any request which is coming, if request URL pattern is matching with / contact, permit. Any other request comes, authenticate. How to authenticate? With HTTP basic. Customizer with the defaults, form login with the defaults. What is earlier behavior available? Follow the same behavior for the basic authentication. Only remember, for contact URL, security should not execute. For the remaining URLs, security should be executed. That is the meaning. Are you clear with this? Good. Fine. Next one. Next one. In this application, we have configured credentials for the authentication. How many credentials how many users we configured? How many users we configured? Only one user we configured. But in the real time, only one user will be available. My clients, now assume that IRCTC application. Make My Trip is one client, Yatra is one client, GoIBIBO is one client. Three clients available for my provider. For three clients, will I give same credentials? Three clients want to access my business. For three consumers, will I share same credentials or I should give different credentials? I should give the different credentials for the three users. So how to configure multiple users for the authentication? That is the next topic. Able to follow me? Are you clear what we discussed as of now? So how to customize the Spring Security? How to customize the Spring Security? By using security filter chain. By using security filter chain. Next one, in our application, we configured one user details. Username and password we configure for the single user. But I want to configure multiple users to access my application. Multiple user credentials I want to configure. So credentials you can configure programmatically or credentials you can store in the database also. First let us see how to configure credentials programmatically, hard-coded credentials. So that's where we are using one concept called in-memory authentication. What is that concept, guys? In-memory authentication. What is the meaning of in-memory authentication? In-memory authentication means storing user credentials in the program for the authentication purpose. So three different approaches, guys. First time, default credentials. Username is user, password is random. Second time, property file credentials. Only one user. Third approach, programmatically. Programmatically, we are going to configure the credentials. If you configure credentials programmatically, that is called in-memory authentication. Okay, how to configure in-memory authentication? We are going to configure a user manager to store our user details, right? In the configuration class only, let us create one more Spring Bean, that is user details manager class. So it is in-memory user details manager class I am taking. In-memory user details manager. Okay. In-memory users. We are going to take this. So we will represent this as a Spring Bean. How to represent this as a Spring Bean? By using @bean annotation. What we will do in this class? We are going to configure user details like this. We are going to configure multiple user details like this. So how to configure that user details? User dot with the default password encoder dot username, okay, some Raj, and password. Default password encoder, okay, password something like Raj @123. This is one user. This is one user. We can configure this as U1. One user details we are configuring with the default password encoder. Username and password is available, and we are going to use dot build method. We are using dot build method, which is giving user 1. Similarly, can we configure multiple users? Yes, user 2 and user 3. User 3. All right. So I'm configuring three users in my application. Okay. Now return these users. Return new in-memory user details manager with user objects. User 1 comma, user 2 comma, user 3. Now you can log in. You can log in our application by using any one of this user data. Programmatically, we are configuring multiple users. If you configure multiple users like this, it is called in-memory user details authentication. Within the program, we are configuring multiple users to access our application. Are you clear with my point? So I am creating a Spring Bean. So now Spring Security is going to use these user objects for the authentication purpose. Let's try. Run as boot application. Run as Spring Boot application now. Go to Postman. Username. I'm configuring Raj. Then Raj at the rate 123. Send. Fine, it is working successfully. Okay, what about the property file credentials? Ashok ID at the rate 123. Send the request. No, not working. Why property file data not working now? Why property file data not working now? Because we have customized user details manager. So when we customize that programmatically, these users only will be allowed for the login. Suppose if I don't write this bean, then property file data it will take. If I write programmatically, it will take only programmatic user details. So if you configure users like this is called in-memory authentication. But in the real time, are we going to use in-memory? Where users will be available? Where the users will be available? Users will be available in the database. Users will be available in the, whenever you register, your data will be available in the database. How I need to authenticate now? By getting your details from the database. That is our next concept. Okay. So develop application which is using with a login and registration. So user should be able to create the registration, then user data should be stored into database. With that data, user should be able to log in. Now the second part, the real security implementation by using database integration. Are you able to follow this? Fine. But so I will stop with this now. We'll continue our session in the today evening. Huh. Timing 6 p.m. React class is there. Huh? Okay. I want to take the class today evening. Today evening, I want to take the class and tomorrow morning also. I want to complete Spring Security today and tomorrow. Okay. So then can we take the class evening at 8 p.m. in the online? Yeah. So evening 8 p.m. I will take in the online. Then tomorrow morning also at 8 p.m. we will take and we'll work on that. Huh? Okay. Okay, then fine, guys. We'll do one thing. Today evening, I will ask faculty to stop the React.js class and I will take Spring Security at the 6 p.m. offline and online. Okay, good. So today evening at 6 p.m. we have a class, both offline and online. We are going to understand how to implement user login, user registration by using Spring Security. So once it is completed, then we will start with OAuth and JWT in the tomorrow session. Is this clear? Good. So we'll meet again today evening at 6 p.m. guys. Thank you.